Hello, everybody. This is Robert Ziggy Ziegler from the University of Virginia coming in with a special episode of the Paul Farrington Show. Now, you might wonder, what makes this episode so special? It's not just that I'm in my Greg Zuerlein Rams jersey. I had to bust this out of the closet for this react. You'll notice, it's just Robert Ziggy Ziegler. That's it. That's the whole show today. There's no fancy intro graphics. Paul's not around to edit these. There's no Jack. Jack got lost in a 7-Eleven talking to a girl wearing a Dolphins jersey. We haven't seen him in weeks. And then Paul was in Atlanta getting ready to watch Notre Dame play Ohio State. I don't think that's going to go super well, but we'll see. We'll see. In any case, what is the headline of this show? Headline of this show has to be Saquon Barkley. The Eagles beat the Rams 28-22 in an incredible victory. And when we were previewing this show, you can go back and watch our preview show, we said the biggest worry about this Eagles team was Jalen Hurts and whether Jalen Hurts would be able to get it done passing. Well, this game, I will say Jalen Hurts did not get it done passing. 65 total passing yards. I know he threw for 128, but he also took plenty of nasty sacks. The Rams got after him over and over again. Otherwise, A.J. Brown, 14 yards. Devontae Smith, 21 yards. Not good enough passing. This is the Saquon Barkley show. Saquon Barkley now is number 5 on the list for most rushing yards in a single playoff game. He actually was tied with Norm Van Brocklin down there for a little bit. I thought that might be where it ended. But no, he got a few more. Went to number 5, just past Derrick Henry. And what an incredible performance from him. You talk about adding him as a free agent. Free agent signings, sometimes they make a big difference. Usually they don't. It is hard for me to think of a free agency signing in recent years that in year one has delivered more value than Saquon Barkley. This is his offense. This is 2 weeks in a row now in the playoffs, facing good opponents where the Eagles' passing game has struggled, and Saquon Barkley has gone off. Now, I know he didn't have any rushing touchdowns last week, but those 120 rushing yards were incredibly important. This game, the explosive runs from the Eagles were incredible. Set aside the passing game. If you've got a running back who runs for 78-yard touchdown, 62-yard touchdown, and Jalen Hurts, even if he's not a great passer, threw in 70 yards on the ground, including a huge 44-yard touchdown at the beginning of the game. I'm not sure how repeatable that is, but you are probably going to win that football game. And sure enough, despite some nerves at the end of the game, Matthew Stafford looking like he might put together a vintage game-winning drive, it just didn't come for the Rams today. Now, there's a few things to talk about, I think, in this game. We talked about Saquon Barkley. That has to be story number 1. There's no doubt about it. But this was a battle of two very closely matched teams, I think. You can look at how they played, and it looks like this game should have been very close by the numbers, too. Rams 400 yards, Eagles 350. Both teams, Eagles 6 for 15 on third down, Rams 6 for 16. Eagles 1 for 1 on fourth, Rams 1 for 2 on fourth. Penalties, Rams 30 yards, Eagles 14 yards. So what caused the difference? The difference in this game was that the Eagles' defense, when they really needed a play, came up with it. Now, obviously, the Jalen Carter play to sack Matthew Stafford on third down and more or less ice the game was huge. But there were other big plays that came for the Eagles, too. The fumbles were huge. That Kyren Williams fumble, we talked about it in our preview. Kyren Williams had fumbled 7 times this season going into this game. A lot of coaches would bench him. Bill Belichick probably would have cut him. Sean McVay believed in Kyren Williams, and we love Kyren Williams on the show. Paul Farrington produced Kyren Williams' podcast for Notre Dame a while ago, so we love him. You can go back and check. We've got some funny stories about it. This just wasn't quite his game. He put up 100 yards on the ground, and that was nice. He did his job rushing, but you have to hold on to the football, especially in those weather conditions where, it's dumping snow the later you get into the game. You can't afford to be losing possessions. So the rushing game for the Rams, the fumbles were a disaster. Matthew Stafford, he's getting old. I'm not sure. This doesn't get talked about a lot. He's 36. He's a late 36. He's had some real injury history. He was considering retiring just a couple of years ago. This is a great performance from him. There's no doubt about it. But it wasn't quite good enough. The Rams just weren't able to get some of their key contributors going early in the game. Obviously, the fourth quarter for the Rams was very, very good. I know it didn't quite work out their way. But before that fourth quarter, Puka Nacua had done basically nothing. Cooper Kupp, you'd heard his name a couple times. He'd come for some big catches, but he didn't explode. Tyler Higbee was doing all right, but he had to leave the game. Demarcus Robinson had a couple big catches. But the Rams' offense just wasn't consistent enough. And that's the benefit that the Eagles' 285 rushing yards will get you, right? I don't know why they took the ball out of Saquon's hand late in the game when they needed to just get a first down to ice the game. But when you've got a running back averaging 8 yards a carry that can bust open for 60, 70-yard touchdown runs, you've got a scary offense. And if the Eagles had to pass more this game, I don't think they would have won. Right? When we talked about the value of Saquon Barkley, that means that this Rams defense that has 7 sacks on the day, think of how many more they could have had if Jalen Hurts had attempted more than 20 passes. 20 pass attempts, 7 sacks. Like, he was getting he was getting sacked a quarter of his dropbacks. It's unreal. Right? This is a disastrous performance for that. But when you've got Saquon Barkley, it doesn't matter. So, looking forward to this game, if you're the Philadelphia Eagles. The Rams, this is an unfortunate loss. This felt like a special year. But I think Stafford will be back. All the key contributors will be back. And some of the young guys on this defense, like Jared Verse, will be back. It's really unfortunate that the Rams weren't able to get more done this year. But this was a critical performance for the Eagles. And at this point now, I think if you're an Eagles fan, you have to be feeling pretty good about where you stand in the NFC. Because what looked like you might have to travel to Detroit to face a red-hot Lions team, actually what you get to do is you get to host the Commanders, who you beat once this year, and the time you lost, Kenny Pickett was playing. Now look, that's not going to be a gimme game. You know, it's easy to look back and say, well, the Eagles beat the Commanders 26-18. How big a deal was it? They had to put up 20 points in that fourth quarter. Jaden Daniels stepped up and almost took the Commanders to that victory. It took an explosion from the Eagles' offense right near the end of the game to make that work. Then you go and look at the game just a couple weeks ago. It was a must-win game for the Eagles, and I know Jalen Hurts was out. The defense played, and Jaden Daniels threw for 5 touchdowns. So it's not going to be a gimme game. Now, we saw this week, I think, you have to be thrilled hosting a playoff game in that building. Philadelphia is one of the hardest places to play, maybe the hardest place to play in the NFL. Whether or not you've got the weather, and say what you will about the fans, it's a rowdy environment. It's a very hard place to play. You saw even Matthew Stafford struggle with it today. You want those guys on your side. And I'd much rather be playing there than in Detroit. But this Commanders team is a tough out. You know, it feels like I'd expect the Eagles to be maybe 4.5, 5.5 point favorites going into that game. But the Commanders have shown you they can keep up with anybody. Their offense can score on anybody, and their defense was able to limit an incredible Lions offense. So, if I'm an Eagles fan, you know, I'm very happy about this result. You have to be happy about winning playoff games. You beat a tough Packers team in the wild card round. You beat a tough Rams team in this round. You overcame some adversity. But I think the number one thing that the Eagles need in order to beat the Commanders is going to be a passing game. Saquon's an incredible player. There's no doubt about it. But in the playoffs, you cannot get away with 65 passing yards this game, 110 passing yards last week. Jalen Hurts taking key sacks. Like, Saquon Barkley is an incredible player, but, you know, you got A.J. Brown, you've got Devontae Smith. There's so much firepower on this offense. Congratulations to Devontae Smith, by the way. He's somehow the Eagles' all-time postseason receiving yards leader. I don't really know how that happened. I'm sure Eagles fans weren't surprised by this, but I was shocked to see that happen. I guess that tells you how tough the receivers have been for a lot of Phillies history. But that Commanders game is going to be exciting next week. So what's the takeaway from this game for Philadelphia? It's a great win. You're happy to win 28-22 over the Rams. And ultimately, I mean, at this point now, you've beaten Jordan Love and the Packers. You forced Jordan Love to have an incredible game. The defense didn't force any interceptions from Stafford, but they forced 2 fumbles and held the line when needed to. Guys like Jalen Carter stepped up for the biggest plays of the game. And Saquon Barkley is as advertised. At this point now, he had 205 rushing yards today, past Norman Brocklin to go 5th. He had 2 big touchdowns. He had 120 yards last week. I don't know what they're going to set the over-under at for the Commanders, but it's got to be somewhere in the 120s or 130s. You just feed this guy, and he kills you on the ground. So, you know, Paul and Will Coots, 2 friends of the podcast, Paul the host, texting me, they're saying anybody but the Eagles. I understand why they think that. But if I'm an Eagles fan, you have to be happy to be hosting a playoff game in the building. Still, divisional conference championships don't come along all the time. It was a good game from the Eagles. There's not a whole lot more to say about that. Now, if you've been enjoying this video, if you've been enjoying the stuff we've been doing, feel free to throw us a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think about the game, what you think about the Ziggy show. It's tough to just sit here. You know, Paul's so easy to play off. Jack's so easy to play off. I've got to sit alone in my room and just talk about this game. That's why this video is perhaps a little bit shorter than usual. But if you've liked this, if you got some questions for a Ziggy-only mailbag, I'm thinking about running one on Monday. We'll see. You can throw those in the comments, too. And I'll be back in just a couple hours with a Bills-Ravens reaction. That should be an incredible game, too. They're going for the right to play Kansas City at Arrowhead. Still, huge win for the Eagles. 28-22. Saquon Barkley has a historic day. And at this point, doubt the Eagles at your own peril. People like me can sit back and say they need a better passing game. Maybe they do. Saquon Barkley is changing the narrative around running backs. He's changing the narrative around the whole NFL. And honestly, it's tough to see this Eagles team losing. That's all I've got. I will see you all in just a few hours for the AFC game reaction. And have a nice night, y'all.